So let's talk appraisals. Jared Jones with the Jones Group. Let me tell you, number one, why do appraisals come in low? Do you own the hottest house in the neighborhood? If your house is hot and the neighbors are not, there's a good chance your appraisal is going to be tested. Number two, the market has changed. Appraisals are always done with the history of the marketplace in mind, which means that if the marketplace is climbing, there's a good chance that your appraisal just might come in low. Number three, your appraisal could come in low, get me on this one, if the appraiser made a mistake. And number four, sometimes property appraisals are not on value because the property was priced by the seller improperly. So let's get started. What do we do with this problem? Okay, number one, the best defense is good offense. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a sports person. I know I look it, but I would tell you that in this situation, get out in front and make sure that your appraisal does not come in low in the first place. So obviously, an appraisal is oftentimes referred to as an inspection, which is not an actual inspection in the sense of structural mechanical, but they do walk around and look at your property. So they're going to be there to not only verify the square footage and the property details like bedroom count, stuff like that, but they're also going to be there to make sure that the property is not a safety hazard. So they're going to look at things like your roof, the wood exterior, if there's, features like that on the outside, cracking, wiring hanging out, stuff like that can easily be dealt with to where it does not show up for the appraiser. But number two, you can also make sure that if your house is prone to come in short because you own a really nice house, then point out the features in advance of the appraiser coming over by having a little letter for the appraiser that tells them what all you did to the property in your time of ownership, when you did it, and how much it cost. So an improvement sheet absolutely will help you, especially if it's a flip property, something like that, where you're really setting a new standard for a higher price point in the neighborhood. You can leave comparables. So I think of most appraisers will probably throw them to the side because these guys really have to do their own homework. But it's not a bad idea, especially if you think there's something tricky about the comparables, something that may not be noticed well. By all means, feel free to leave those out. You cannot leave a former property appraisal out. So if you did have your property appraised, the appraisers will not look at those when they do their appraisal. It's been my experience anyways. So now the appraisal is complete and it's low. Level one is the seller's agent should try and have what's called a rebuttal done on the property, where you actually review the property appraisal and see if there's not an option to get that value up. So the number one thing when I'm doing a rebuttal, and I've done these over the years, 3,000 sales, lots of listings, and appraisals coming short. Multiple properties recently, I've had properties, a property in like the $300,000 or $40,000 price range. The appraisal was off by 5% plus, over 5%. I was able to get the appraisal up $17,000 by following the steps I'm going to share with you right now. Also had another appraisal, same thing, was 10% off. It was a $450,000 sale, came in at like 410. And then with the secondary review, follow-up review, we were able to get the report up by $40,000. So here's how you get the value up. Okay, so number one, you take the report and you review it for accuracy. Okay, did they make any basic mistakes? So did they actually get the square footage wrong, or did they miss a bedroom in the count? Is there something that is that they formed an opinion off of that is really flawed? Okay, so you want to check that out first. It does happen. It's more seldom, but it does happen. The next thing that you're going to want to do is review the comps. Did they miss a comparable sale that should have been considered in the report? So a lot of times the content of the report itself could also be questionable. Like they used a bunch of properties that were inferior to the subject property and then beat the property's value up as a result. This happens quite a bit. So you want to find other qualifying comparables. Now, there are rules to this. So keep in mind, one of the reasons why appraisals do come in low is because appraisers are bound to tell the story of the home's value based on guidelines. So they're not doing it based on what the market's shopping for. So that's a real hard thing, right? So something I didn't point out, by the way, earlier is the market is willing to pay a price, but then the appraiser can't articulate it in the report explaining why the buyer is willing to pay it. Like, the buyer has no other options at a better price. So this is market value. Because the appraiser has to follow proximity guidelines, for instance, for the addresses they include in the report may be far removed from the actual marketplace's interest in what they were willing to pay for a property. This gets frustrating for listing agents, right? It's because we know what the market is, but then the appraisers, their hands are tied to a degree, because property, for instance, for an appraiser to use it might be under 1.5 miles away, for instance, if it's an urban area. Or the property must have matching bedroom counts. There's 15% square footage limitations above or below the subject property. You can't use things that are wildly non-comparable, which is understandable, but the limitations are there, okay? So the bottom line though, sometimes I will find a comp comparable. Appraisers oftentimes cannot cross county lines. So you might have a property that has all these great supporting comps, and then find that it's up against the next county, and those counties' values are different. It affects the value of your property. Okay, missed it, right? The seller didn't know that, thought they would get more for the house. The listing agent might not even have noticed it. Crossing school boundaries a lot of times is the same way as it relates to value. So listen to this. So you look at the comps, you see, are the most kind comps being used in this report? The other thing that I'm gonna do besides checking, did they miss anything? Did they use the best comps? Is the adjustments. There's a lot of work that can be done in revising value by questioning the adjustments or lack of them as it relates to your property that you're trying to sell, or the comps. So let me explain this. So in the comparison process, when an appraiser is building a report, if the house, for instance, that they're comparing to the seller's home for sale, they take the house across the street that sold last month, and that house has no fireplace, no swimming pool, one less bedroom, a little bit smaller, then they give a bunch of adjustments to make it more comparable to the subject property. They balance them out, basically. Does that make sense? So sometimes I would find that, for instance, the property I'm selling has way more appeal than another comp, and yet there's no accommodation for the fact that my comp or my home that I'm selling has way nicer floors, way higher level kitchen, things of that nature, and then I will take that to the appraiser. I'll actually say, hey, comp number one, you have $4,000 of value for the appeal of that home versus my home, and my home's got $15,000 easily. At a discount, it's got $15,000 more value, and I will argue that particular fact with them so that they know what we're dealing with, okay? So that's just something I would explain to you, is like, hey, these comps need to support the value, okay? And if you're sitting there making adjustments that aren't fair, and I can call them out and find them, and that's the thing, the listing agent you hire needs to have a really good understanding of how appraisals are built and what is the guideline the appraiser is using. And they can be a little bit different by the type of appraisal. So bottom line, let me tell you this. If you make your best argument, I would say that probably 65% of the time, probably even higher, maybe 75% of the time, appraiser is not going to change the report. So it is a slim chance that the appraiser moves the report, okay? It does happen, but there's a lot of times nothing will happen, okay? Especially if you don't have any new comparables for them to consider. If you have no new comparables, that's the easiest way to have your rebuttal turned down, okay? So even if you see certain flaws, make sure to try to add new comparables, because then they take a little bit harder to look at your rebuttal, is my experience.
With our home, low hassle was a must. Jared was our main point of contact, but he had a team of experts around him to make sure no detail was missed.
Jared Jones is the way to go. Call 706-5000.
Get your home sold guaranteed.